Hello everybody, it's Saturday and time to do a live walk in Odessa's old town. Today we're gonna walk along the most grand and the most magnificent street in Odessa's historical quarter, Pushkinskaya. It's named after a prominent poet and writer, Pushkin. Let me flip the camera and let's go. This is the entrance to Pushkin Street. And this spot, in my opinion, is the most beautiful area in the city's old town. It was beautifully described by an Odessa-born writer who later became a prominent Jewish revolutionary. His last name is Jabotinsky. That's how he described the spot. To the right, I see the first houses of Italian Street, in my time known as Pushkin Street, since it was there the poet wrote Onegin. Turning around is the English Club, and farther off in the distance, the left facade of the Municipal Theatre. These were built at different times, but all with one and the same love of the foreign spirit of the city. Beautiful description. And now let me cross the road and let's start our walk. Beautiful view of the National Opera and Ballet Theatre, the English Club and the City Hall, the Archaeology Museum, and these are the first houses of Pushkin Street, which were built in 1830s by Italian architects. The first city's architects were Italian. This house consisted of apartments for rent, and this one was turned into the Hotel Europe. These days both buildings consist of privately owned apartments, and on the first floor there is a bank. A beautiful perspective on the road. You see how broad the street is? That's how the streets were designed by the first city plan, which was created in 1790s when the city was just founded. And that's what amazed travelers who were coming here. It snowed a lot yesterday and now it's -2 Celsius. It's a little bit slippery. The Soviet tradition to put stone plaques on the houses if prominent person lived in an apartment in the building. Four years ago, as a result of decentralization, Odessa started keeping more money for itself. Before that, most of the money had been transferred to the capital. So as a result of that, the city started restorations of the old houses in the historical quarter. And Pushkin Street was among the first ones to be restored. You can see the result. So all these houses have been restored over the last 3 years. And the beautifully restored door. In the evening, they are lit up with the evening lights. So it's a really nice and beautiful street. This mansion once belonged to a Jewish family of bankers, and the house across the road was owned by a Greek family. Later, a family member became the city mayor. So a Greek merchant lived across the road from the Jewish banker on Italian street, as this is how the street was called in the 1800s. And this tells you a lot about Odessa of the 1800s. It was a very cosmopolitan city and a melting pot. These days, the Greek mansion houses the medical college. To the left of the front door, there's a plaque to a Greek merchant who owned the house and later became the city mayor and donated a lot of his money into the city. And the building, which belonged to the Jewish family, has been housing the regional prosecutor's office. There was a fire inside the building in 2006. The mansion was badly damaged, but they managed to restore it. And then the city passed it on to the regional prosecutor's office. Let me quote another beautiful description written about the street by this Odessa-born writer and a Jewish revolutionary Jabotinsky in his novel The Five. Pushkin Street, an important street, majestically sleepy. For some reason, even the large hotel on the corner didn't stick out. It seemed that the grand classical antiquity was living out its last days on this section of the street, where grain traders were still called merchants and mixed both Greek and Italian phrases into their conversation. That's how Jabotinsky found the street in the very early 1900s, a little bit before the 1917 revolution. That's the hotel he mentions. That was the Paris Hotel. And now I want to cross the street and show you how this building looks from the back. You know, I love checking courtyards. They tell so much about local lifestyle and traditions. And here's another view on the road. It's one of the few streets which has preserved the original granite cobbling, which was put here around 1860s. Since the Soviet times, this house has been turned into the apartments. Today the apartments are privately owned and there are commercial offices on the first floor. Let's go see how the building looks from the back. And Odessa's courtyard, which is in the back of that building. That's how the building looks from the back. Originally, these were huge terraces. Then in the Soviet times, when large apartments were turned into the small communal flats, the windows were turned into the doors and the terraces became a hall which was shared among the tenants. And then in the Soviet times, people put glass windows to create more space. And here is a private entrance to the apartment. Let me zoom in. In the old days, courtyards in the back in rich neighborhoods were used to park carriages, and these days they're also used by people who live here to park the cars. Let's go back onto Pushkin Street. There's an old wall painting. And the ceiling of the arch with the traces of the old paintings. And here's the facade of the building. Quite a difference. It's 11 o'clock in the morning, but there are not that many people outside because it's Sunday morning, and then because of the weather. Here's one of the youngest buildings on this sheet. It was built in 1908. Belonged to an Italian family of merchants. These days, right half of the building belongs to a bank. Here's the sign of the bank. And the left part consists of several privately owned apartments. One of the apartments has been put for sale for $2,000 per square meter. A square meter is about 10.5 square feet. This is a standard price of an apartment in the city center in a well-preserved listed building. Yet another recently restored house. One of the apartments in this building was occupied by a famous violin teacher in 1930s. He was known in the city for discovering musically gifted children even in the slums. In the early 1930s, his students started winning international musical contests, and the Soviet government let him open the first in the USSR boarding school for musically gifted children. Among his most famous students is David Oistrakh. And here's a beautifully restored ceiling of the arch. According to the city plan, houses were built as close to the road as possible, wall to wall, so the only space people had was in the back of the building. And in the rich areas like this space in the back was used to park carriages. And here's the plaque to this famous violin teacher, Stolyarsky. We still have this school for musically gifted children, which is very popular among the locals. The teacher's name is Stolyarsky. Here's one of the most grand mansions or palaces on Pushkin Street. Among its owners in the 1800s was a Jewish family of bankers, the same family who owned a mansion at the beginning of the street across the road from the Greek merchant. This was the place where they lived. Then in the late 1800s, they moved to Western Europe. The mansion was nationalized by the state, and after the 1917 revolution was turned into the Museum of Western and Eastern Arts. It still houses this museum. Beautiful entrance. Restored door and cast iron top. And here's a building of the bank. It was built by a very famous city architect of Italian origin in the early 1900s. Belonged to a bank. Over there on the wooden door in the old Russian style there is a sign which says bank. Up until 3 years ago the building belonged to the private bank. Unfortunately, the bank went bankrupt. The city took the building from the bank and is planning to auction it on a condition that the new owners would restore the facade. Indeed, it looks a little bit tired indeed. I've reached the crossroads with Greek Street. Greeks were among the city's early settlers. One of the first churches was Greek Orthodox. One of the first city markets belonged to the Greeks. It was up this road. They were trading on the market and settling along the street. That's why it was called the Greek Street. We still have Greek Street, Jewish Street, Bulgarian Street. And another gorgeous building which belonged to the insurance company and the bank before the 1917 revolution. These days it houses the interior design and furniture company. Metro Park Hotel. And some of the most expensive boutique stores in the city next to the hotel. Let me zoom in so that you can get a better look. Symbol. One of the fancy stores. The second floor is also occupied by the store, and the third floor consists of apartments. So in the late 1800s, the street's name was changed from Italian to Pushkin, because Pushkin stayed here when he visited Odessa. And you've probably guessed that I've been showing you the Pushkin statue. Here's Pushkin. And this yellow building was the hotel, and that's one of the two addresses where Pushkin stayed during his time in Odessa. He was here in 1823, 1824. He worked on some parts of Eugene Onegin here in Odessa, and also wrote lots of beautiful poems. We say that Pushkin made Odessa immortal because he dedicated a chapter of Eugene Onegin to our city. This building was badly damaged during the World War II bombings. Originally, here on the second floor, there was a huge balcony which was destroyed during the bombings and was not restored after the war. These days, part of the building houses the Pushkin Museum. Another part of the building consists of the commercial offices and apartments. This is the sign which says that Pushkin stayed in this building in 1823, 1824. And this is the sign of the Pushkin Museum. The most famous historical hotel in the city is the Bristol. This is the building of the Bristol. It was built in 1899, just in 3 years. And became the most posh hotel in the city. In the Soviet times, its name was changed to the Red Hotel, and it became one of the VIP hotels for the Soviet elite, with a very posh restaurant with the red carpet. In 1990s, it became privately owned. The owners spent 10 years restoring it, and in 2010 reopened the Bristol. It even has the kosher restaurant. That's the end of our today's walk. Thanks for watching. Until next Saturday. Meanwhile, if you are interested in walking the city in real time with a local guide, we'll be delighted to take you on a zoom around walk of Odessa's historical quarter. To book, follow the link in the top comment below the description. Bye for now.